All right, so hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's our second installment of our Adult Neurology PD panel. We are a part of the NMatch team, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Alyssa. I am a fourth year at A.T. Still University School of Osteopathic Medicine in Arizona, and I am originally from Virginia.
Hi everyone, thank you all for being here. I'm Meghna and I am a fourth year at the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine.
This is just a quick overview of our session today. We're going to do quick introductions. Each of our PDs today are going to do an overview of their program. We're really fortunate to have four awesome PDs, and then we're going to have the rest of the time to do our Q&A session.
So we just wanted to talk a little bit about NMatch for those who are unfamiliar with what this is. We are a medical student-run initiative, and really our focus is to promote networking, education, and information sharing within the neurology community, specifically for those who are applying to both adult and child neurology residencies. So we've listed some of our initiatives. I would highly recommend people check out our event calendar. We post a lot about upcoming open houses and events like these, program director panels. And we had a great program director panel earlier this week on Monday. We'll be posting that link on YouTube. So if you want more information about that, feel free to check out our Instagram and our Twitter. We'll put the handles at the end of today's session.
All right, so here are our panelists for tonight. We have Dr. George Creel from Baylor Scott and White Health in Temple, Texas. We have Dr. Pearce Korb from Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. Dr. Kenneth Lee from the University of Chicago in Chicago, Illinois. And last but not least, Dr. Max Levy from Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. All right, so Dr. Creel, you're up first.
Hi, I'm George Creel. I'm the program director at the neurology program at Baylor College of Medicine at Baylor Scott and White in Temple, Texas. We are a program currently with four neurology residents per year, so there's 16 of us. And very soon we're going to be six residents per year. So we are a growing program, pretty excited about that.
Awesome, thank you. And we have Dr. Korb next.
Yes, thank you. I'm Pearce Korb. I'm the program director for the adult neurology program at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. We're a large program at 8 residents per year. And we also have a program that has 5 residents per kind of year in child neurology as well. And although I'm not the program director for that, I'm happy to field questions about that as well.
Thank you. And next, Dr. Lee.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kenny Lee. I am the program director at University of Chicago. In my own neurotic way, I made a few slides, so I'll try to go through them very quickly here, so we can go through them. A little bit about the University of Chicago. It's located in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Chicago, kind of about 7 miles from downtown. You can go to the next slide. We are located on the south side, and so our service area is really kind of dedicated to kind of an underserved kind of population, kind of 8 of the 10 lowest socioeconomic areas within Chicago are really directly within our service area. So really kind of speaks to who we are as a university. Next slide, please. So we have 10 residents per year in our adult neurology residency program. We have 2 residents in our pediatric neurology program. We are an advanced program, though we do have positions for in our intern years at our main institution as well as our sister hospital. And we have also multiple fellowships as well. Next slide, please. And so this is just us. So myself, and then we have a team of 2 APDs, Dr. Dan Kurz and Dr. Serena Yin. And Marla Schofield, I have her picture just because she's our program coordinator, and I think all the other program directors would say that they could not do their job without the program coordinator. So I just wanted to shout out her as well. I have her information here as well, if you'd like. And then we are an institution with a commitment to teaching, just shouting out some of our residents who have won teaching awards, throughout the university. We have one resident, Stephen Lee, from last year, and you can just kind of see, several of our residents have been honored with this. Next slide, please. And, just our resident experience, and again, these slides will be available for you. And we, kind of really try to, we have a commitment to really kind of making sure that you have a robust experience here, kind of in terms of patient experience, educational commitment, and really kind of dedicated to the resident experience. So with that, I'll leave it and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And lastly, Dr. Levy. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm Max Levy. I am coming to you from Tulane University, New Orleans, Louisiana. I've got a couple of slides myself. Let me see if I'm able to share them. And there we go. Let's see. I'm going to kind of zip through when I did this last year, everyone else had a whole big long slide deck. So I'm a little bit over prepared, but I'll stick with the highlights. And so this is a little collage that I made kind of going through some of the things that people think about when they think about New Orleans. Our program really couldn't be anywhere else. You know, there's a lot of fun that happens in New Orleans. It's a really great learning environment, tons of great food, but, you know, we work with an underserved community and there's a lot of good that we're able to do. And so people in New Orleans have kind of a way of kind of really living deliberately, cooking, making art. They do it all with their hearts, and there's a lot of good that you can be doing here. This is our mission statement. This was crafted by our residents. We're a very resident driven program. Um, and I'm going through these sort of quickly. I'll make sure that you all have these available to you as well. We're a 5 resident per year categorical program. Our intern year, I think, is a really hidden strength of our program. If you know the X plus Y system, it came out of our internal medicine department, and so it really works well with our program. We're a fairly tight-knit program, so you get lots of kind of individualized attention. We've only got a handful of fellowships, and so there's really a lot of attending resident contact. You'll really get to know everyone, work with everybody. Um, these are some of our residents in the past couple of years and where they've gone on to do their fellowships. Basically, lots of big programs or lots of programs close to home. They get to go where they want to go. Um, we work at a couple of different sites. University Medical Center is kind of the successor to Charity Hospital. And it's kind of in the middle of the city. Um, uh, we've got a really nice working environment, lots of art there. They just redid it a couple of years ago. East Jefferson is kind of our other flagship hospital, kind of more of a suburban style of patient population. We do have some time at the VA and at Children's. Um, there's a little bit about our block schedule. But we have kind of a fairly light, more elective time, less nights, a little bit more of a shift from outpatient to inpatient over the last couple of years. We used to be very inpatient heavy, and we've figured out some ways to balance that a little bit better. I'm going to skip through these for right now. We can talk about them later. Um, and I'm just going to kind of cap it off. We want people at our program who want to be there and who want to be here. And we can make you a neurologist. We can't make you be a great person. I think that tells you a little bit about who we are, what we think about. And I am going to turn it back over and we'll go from there.
Alrighty. Thank you so much. We're actually going to jump right into our Q&A session now. We have plenty of time. We have lots of participants here today. So participants, if you could ask your questions in the chat, and me and Meghana are going to go ahead and say those questions out loud on behalf of you all. If there are any questions that you see in the chat that you really resonate with or that you would really like to get answered, if you could go ahead and react to those questions with a little heart or a thumbs up so that we know which questions you guys are really burning for us to ask. So go ahead and the chat is open. I guess as we're waiting for questions to come in, we can actually just start with if each of the PDs could just share with us what their favorite part of their program is. I think that could just start off our conversation today. Dr. Lee, we can start with you.
Sure. I think it's going to be a little bit of a cliched answer, but I mean, really, I do this because of, the residents and really kind of the opportunity to work with them. For me, kind of the thing that I love and I resonate the most with is just kind of seeing the residents really grow from kind of starting their neurology journey, as like maybe a PGY2 who's, constantly looking down at their pager because they're concerned about, is it going off or am I missing something and those kind of things, to really kind of then being a leader as a PGY4 and really kind of leading rounds and, teaching me things. I mean, I always love that. And just kind of really seeing that blossom. And so, I mean, that's just, again, it's kind of a little bit of I think it's a shared experience that a lot of program directors have and a lot of educators have, but at the same time, it is something that I do really enjoy myself.
So for me, real quick, I mean, it's an easy answer. It's cliche, but it's true. We get into this role of program directors usually through a first love of teaching, and I'm fresh off a resident continuity clinic this afternoon, and sort of that moment where I was with some new PGY2s, and there was a case of, I won't be specific for privacy reasons, but spinal stenosis and low back pain is not often taught in my department, and I get to teach them that. And we went through some imaging together and had kind of that light bulb moment. If I could bottle that up and just make that my entire day, week, and year, it would be like the perfect life, to be honest.
I'm going to kind of echo a little bit about what both of you said, that I think I agree, it's kind of cliche, but I think teaching the residents, watching them grow, seeing them develop, coming from, fresh out of medical school, being an MD, being a doctor, but not ready for practice, watching them grow and develop their own style, develop their breadth of experience, and watching, helping them mature into independent practicing neurologists and helping them join our field, and helping them kind of develop their own interests and make their own progressions. I think you know, that's the secret to it all.
Well, so um, George Creel. I'm a general neurologist. Um, I most like continuity clinic. So what I think is great about continuity clinic is that you never know what's going to walk through the door. So those are made up of cases that residents saw when they're in the hospital, or consults that came in, or patients that they've been following. But every year, I get a new set of residents that are assigned to continuity clinic with me, and I generally get to see them at different stages in their training. And so that is really kind of fascinating to watch the growth and expansion in their skills. Um, and you see how they develop their own interests, and how that manifests in the patients that get, I guess, driven to their clinics that they hold on to. So that's what I enjoy the most.
Thank you all for those great answers. So we've got some questions in the chat. So I'll start with this one. From your perspective, what is the most effective way for applicants to express interest in a program before the interview season? Would an email be possibly considered a red flag? So Dr. Korb, maybe we can start with you.
Oh, okay. Good question. Before interview season, an email, none of these things are absolutes. Especially if there is a true personal connection to a program, a geography. I would not encourage this across the board, because again, what we program directors go through on the day one of application is open up to hundreds upon hundreds of applications we have to look through. I think one of the more effective things that honestly has come across my desk is when there's someone in my department or even someone outside of our institution that reaches out and says, hey, I think this person might apply, and I think they're going to be a great candidate. I think that is sort of a good endorsement of a candidate.
I don't actually respond to emails from people inquiring about residency. I think it's unfair to other candidates who apply to your residency and didn't reach out. I think everybody should have a fair shot. I guess, the only thing that I would think would give people a leg up if they do a sub internship at our institution, and then they become a known quantity. I try not to talk to them as if I'm interviewing them when they happen to be on a sub I, but that is them becoming a known quantity. So I really don't respond to to emails other than requests for sub Is.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, I think that kind of doing a sub internship, just kind of or rotations in general can be helpful. Just to kind of express your interest. I know that can be challenging now for this interview cycle, just because a lot of your fourth year or what have you is already made. But yeah, I mean, if you are able to kind of express that interest, I think just kind of being able to do that, that actually speaks to kind of who you are and are you going to, fit in and gel and essentially with the residency and then so forth.
So yeah, so I'll say that um, just because the question asked if it was a red flag, I would say no, it's not a red flag. But certainly, if the same email address is Hammer emailing us, that does sometimes come across in not the way that the applicant intended. I'll say that if an email comes across my inbox, it certainly catches my attention more if there's anything that seems, if it seems relevant to us and our institution as opposed to just this is me, look at me, I'm a good applicant generically, but I have no reason to have a particular interest in your program over somewhere else. But if there's, a particular reason why one institution is a particularly good fit for you, there's potentially a little bit of value in that. Um, but yeah, I'll leave that there.
In that same vein, we have a few questions on signaling and geographic preferences. Could each of you kind of speak on what your thoughts are on kind of signaling, how you use them, and how much the geographic preferencing really goes into offering up interviews? And Dr. Lee, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to be honest with you, this is still relatively new over the last few years, I would say. So I think that we're it's taken a few years for us to kind of figure out how we approach this as well. What I'll say is that for us, signaling we do take very seriously. And what this does is this kind of brings your attention to you as an applicant. It brings your attention, at least to us, to our review committee, essentially. And so that gets kind of like an early review and everything. And so we review all of our applications, but at the same time, this kind of, it kind of expedites that and so forth. I will say that the geographic signaling is a little bit, for us, it's a little bit less robust in that we're in the Chicagoland area. And so I forget exactly what the term is, but I think it's like, middle Northeast I forget the exact terminology, but this includes a wide swath of Illinois and, Michigan or Wisconsin. And then, we kind of start reviewing applications and it seems like, oh, this applicant is really interested in kind of going to Minnesota or something like that. And so the geographic signaling is a little bit less useful for us. We still look at it, but at the same time, the signaling, I think just for us, does matter much more.
So I'll say that we take a look at both signals and geographic preferences. Signals, we try and look at every application. Certainly, we look at applications with signals earlier when there are more available interview slots. A signal isn't a guarantee for an interview, but it certainly does get you eyes on your application at kind of on a little bit higher of a priority. As far as geographic preferences, um, we do look at that. Our the West South Central region is where we are, and it's a little bit of an oddball because it's Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. and which are all four very, very different places. And we see a lot of applications that are kind of Texas, 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 Texas in their geographic preference write-up. And it just kind of seems like you really want to be in Texas and you just applied to every place in West, South, Central, just because you might as well try and hit all the highlights in your region of preference. And that kind of doesn't always sit well with us.
I'm trying to think about the student perspective, and we didn't have signals, in our time and application. So, thinking strategically, if I can just really try to be as strategic as possible, which I know many of you are trying to be, there's a limitation of the number of signals that you can do. And, I would say that many of you probably have heard a strategy of, how many programs to apply to, what programs to apply to. And you can tier them into, what I call target programs. I like the word foundational programs rather than safety programs. I like that word better, or reach programs. And obviously this speaks to this kind of dirty word of candidacy. You're a human being, not an applicant. But you tend to think about candidacy. So what programs are your reach and target and foundational programs might be different for each one of you. And you can use those signals to really identify programs that you're very interested in. If programs allow for it, we here at VCU tell our own students applying to us, we like to assume that they're potentially interested in coming to stay for residency. So we give them a break and say, please don't signal us. We're going to assume, don't waste your signal on us. And we actually we tell the same thing to our visiting AIs in the hopes that they'll not burn a signal on us because we're assumed they're interested. And then trying to use those signals strategically to really identify programs that you're interested in. It's also kind of like the program that you use a signal on. A signal for us, to be very honest with you and very transparent, means a lot because we, sort of compete regionally with a lot of programs. We can talk about reputational status as being a driver of applications. If someone signals us, it means a lot. It also adds to their narrative if you combine that with geographic preference. The last thing I'll say real quickly about geographic preference is it might be the most useful for those that are looking to move across the country for whatever reason. I mean, sometimes we can kind of glean it from your application, but let's say you're kind of in California now and you happen to be interested in our region of the country for training. That can help the narrative, because otherwise I might scratch my head if someone is sort of, if their application does reveal they're, mainly, in California, I might go, why would they come over to Virginia? So that's a useful use of that feature.
So as I understand this question, essentially, just like medical students want to match somewhere, programs want to fill. And we don't have an unlimited number of slots from which to interview. We have a limited number of slots. And so we do have to select people to interview based on at least our perception of who has a high likelihood of wanting to come to our location. So geographic preference is actually very helpful in that case. So Texas is in West South Central, like Louisiana is. I understand that the students can list up to 3 geographic preferences, and also they could have no preference. So to us, when we're looking at ERAS, all we could see is if you chose us. If you didn't choose us, then it seems like a blank. Through the logic of ERAS, we can actually tell if you chose no one. So if you didn't choose us and you had no and you didn't also have no preference, that meant that you preferred 3 other places to us, 3 other geographic regions to us. So because we want to fill, that's a no-go. You're just not going to get an interview when you've listed 3 other regions as places you prefer to our region. So people who prefer our region are first up in terms of interview priority. People who have no preference are second up. And I have to say, this actually hurts me quite a bit, because in my day, we didn't have these geographic preferences. And I was a military kid. I lived in a lot of different places, and I literally did choose the place based on a place I had never been before. When I had no preference, I really and truly had no preference. But we live in a different environment now, and I think that's quite unfortunate. But that is how it's set up. So I want people to select the programs very carefully that they want to go to, because that is where you're going to get the interviews from. The signal, I think, is more problematic, and it kind of depends on other factors of your application. So, for example, if you have high board scores and you signal us that you want to come, well, you could go anywhere with high board scores. And so signaling us that you want to come here is very meaningful to us, and we take that very seriously. On the other hand, if let's say you have low board scores or there's something else in your application that is less appealing, if you have zero connection to our institution, you're not from the area, you've never visited here, you didn't do a sub-I, a signal almost functions as an anti-signal, meaning that if everybody else turns you down, you will come to us. And I kind of feel that that's unfortunate, and I actually wish that signaling didn't exist because of that.
Okay, thank you all for sharing. The next question is regarding more about applications. So when you review them, what are some things that you're typically looking for or that stand out to you in the personal statement and in the ERAS experiences? Dr. Levy, we can start with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So things that stand out for me so I'll start with the personal experiences, then I'll go to the personal statement. So in the experiences, I want to know, so things that stand out to me are kind of longitudinal commitments, things that you've done for a while, things that show me that you know how to follow through, things that show me that you know how to work well with others. But then I want to see some insight, I don't want to know that you were, the president of XYZ organization and you just kind of held the title and you didn't do anything. I want to know what you did. I want to know how it made you better, how it's going to make you a better neurologist in the future. Um, and kind of to mirror that on the personal statement, there are lots and lots of different ways to go about it. But the one thing I'll say is I don't need to be convinced that neurology is cool. I think neurology is cool. That's why I'm a neurologist. You need to convince me that you think that it's cool and that you want to be a neurologist. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time talking about, let me go back to the beginning of that sentence. Lots of people will use an interesting patient they saw. I think that if you pick a case just because it's an interesting case, that's not for the personal statement. I think it should be something that you drew something from. I think if it's just a cool case to be a cool case and you're going, look what I saw, that's for making a poster, that's for making a case report. That's not for a personal statement, which should be about you.
Well, in a personal statement, I certainly want everybody to put themselves in the best light. But having said that, everybody has an origin story. Everybody's grandmother was bitten by a radioactive spider. So there'll always be some neural connection that I find that somebody writes about in their family. So that's not really what I'm looking for in a personal statement. I do consider neurologists to be very picky people. And so I want to see that you could write and communicate. I want to see that you spent attention to detail in the grammar. I do want to see that if there are any red flags in the application that you've addressed them in the personal statement, or else I think you're trying to hide a thing. But having said that, I like people that have something unique about themselves. One thing that I tell people is that neurology will be your career, and you like neurology, and neurology is great. And like Dr. Levy said, you don't need to convince me that neurology is great. I already know that. But I do like to be surrounded by interesting people. So people that I could sit and have a conversation with, find out something just amazing and different.
I'm just gonna jump back in for a sec. I'm gonna echo what you said about if there are red flags in the application somewhere along the way, find some place to highlight them, acknowledge them. Don't try and hide them. We see a lot of applications. We know when you're trying to hide something. Acknowledge when, when something, when there's something and, have a mature response to it. I think that just trying to hide it, trying to hope no one will notice it is not the best way to go about it. You'll get caught out.
One of the best letters I ever read. I'll keep the details anonymous and protected, but it was a story. It was almost entirely, in fact, it was entirely about how this person picked themselves up in their career and life after a pretty significant arrest. And to me, that showed great bravery, great resilience, and I wanted to talk to that person immediately, and wanted to recruit that person subsequently. But on that note, again, thinking pragmatically, as all of you sitting there nervous about application season, one way to look at it is this is a longer form. The personal statement. Sorry, the personal statement is an opportunity for you to give something to talk about during interviews. I view a lot of these things as a PD who interviews, I don't know, like 120 people a year, and review 500 plus applications on day one. Seeing something that stands out and allows me to sort of go, let's talk about this rock band this person has been in, most of their life. I want to talk about that. That's different than talking about a Sherlock Holmesian search for grandmother's dementia diagnosis. We've heard those before. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I'll echo the panel and just say that absolutely, if there's something on in terms of kind of a red flag or something that you feel like you need more clarification on, please address that head on, and I think Dr. Korb just mentioned, I mean, just, sometimes the best letters or the best personal statements are really kind of centered around that and kind of what's been learned from that. I'll also say that the personal statement is really your way of communicating directly to the program director and to the review committee. I mean, this is a way to kind of express who you are as a person. And things that I look for is, again, not, what case did you see that, that's really cool, the NMO case or whatever and everything. I mean, again, we all see those. What drives you? Who are you as a person, right? These are the things that you really want to communicate and that we want to get a sense of. And so for me, that's really important to kind of see just like, okay, what kind of, who are you as a person? Who are you going to be as a neurologist? And, again, we use this as launching off points, especially during the interviews, to kind of really, latch onto something and say like, hey, you're somebody that, let's talk about this. This is really cool, kind of what you've written about.
Thank you all for answering that question. The next question is from a student who is asking, what do you look for the most in an IMG applicant apart from a good application overall? But I want to reframe this question a little bit just to ask, what are some qualities that you look for overall in a neurology applicant? And maybe if there is something specific to IMGs, you can mention that as well. But what are some qualities that you guys look for in applicants, and what really stands out to you when you are interviewing someone? So Dr. Creel, we can start with you.
Well, so in terms of the application content, I don't really look at IMGs any differently than I look at my other applicants. I'm interested in all the same things. I want to know how they did academically. I wanted to know what other aspects there are to their life, what their interests are, what makes them interesting. I often get applications that have a long list of activities that they were involved in, and research things that they're involved in. And, I was a medical student once upon a time, and I knew I didn't have time for those things either. So instead, what I would be interested in, what did they spend a lot of time doing, and talk about that. So I think that that's much more meaningful than a long, arm's length list of things that they've accomplished in the past. When it comes time to do an interview, I'm going to try to concentrate on the thing that they spent time on that they thought was meaningful to them. I will say that in terms of how I select people for interview, um, uh, just to be open about this, I do look at my list of U.S. grads first because I think I do have a responsibility first to U.S. grads. But if you look at my the list of residents that I have, a number of them are IMGs, so they have a fair chance to come here.
So, first of all, I'll say that for all of you applicants that may be IMGs, I mean, it's very challenging, and and so my heart goes out to you, and just I just admire kind of everything that you have to go through, just because it is very challenging for you all. So the and like Dr. Creel said, we take kind of a holistic look. So we look at a lot of the same things that we do for kind of all of our U.S. Graduates and so forth and everything. The one thing I will say that I do think is one thing that we do keep an eye out for is, because it is so challenging for you in an IMG position, I really try to see what is it that, from a neuroscience standpoint, is the interest in kind of a neurology residency and a neuroscience residency, or is there just interest in a residency, which, is unfortunate that, it has to be broad sometimes, but at the same time, I really try to find somebody that has that passion. And I mentioned that drive kind of when I spoke a little bit earlier, but really I look for that drive about neurology and kind of that passion as to what brought you there. So usually I look for some clues as to that, kind of be it, clinical experience or research experience or, kind of electives or those kind of things. And so if I see that, you're applying to our program and, and this goes really for, it's not just IMGs, but all applicants. And, there's a lot more experience in non-neurology and I'm not really getting a sense of what's bringing you to it. That makes me raise an eyebrow. So that's one thing I'll say from that end.
On the topic of like, what do we look for? I know it's one program, so that's kind of the issue, is like trying to be representative of every program out there. We do make value statements. Our group of selection committee over the years has developed 3 qualities now. It used to be very few, but intellectual curiosity helps drive you through residency, right? The nerdery of neurology, that curiosity will drive you through long days. Second one, maybe the most important one, is true compassion for patients. That patient-centeredness will also get you through the tougher days of residency. And lastly, the third one we've added recently is sort of an interesting word that we've landed on: kindness, which I know sounds like obvious, but we want to be able to work with people that we like and are kind to each other, that show grace to other people, that step in when appropriate and show grace to themselves. And so we've identified that as a third quality here at VCU. But I think every program has sort of their value statements, either stated or unstated. And so we look at that in holistic review to see those experiences that might match with those. And then the interviews serve really a big level for that. And then as far as IMGs go, for us in holistic review, I guess one of the things that certainly we look at, and you might find other programs look at, is when was your most recent meaningful and authentic clinical experience? Because we know that many of you have to sort of take observerships because that's what's available to you. But we find that having authentic clinical experiences relatively recently is an indicator that your skills are there compared to U.S. grads that are also recent grads of U.S. medical schools. So that's one thing that we look for.
So I'll say we're not quite as we don't have our statements written down the same way that Dr. Korb and his team do, but we do look for a fairly similar set of things. We want people who are interested in neurology. We want to see some sort of an interest in the field of neuroscience, something that kind of shows that you have some interest in the brain and nerves. We want kind, interesting people. I want someone who I'm excited to work with for 4 years. 4 years is a long time to work with if you're the wrong person, and 4 years is a long time to be in a program if it's the wrong program for you. And so I'll say that, I mentioned this a little bit before, but we can teach you to be a good neurologist. We can't teach you to be a good person. So some evidence of that. I put value in longitudinal experiences and commitments. I put value in things where, if I see that someone was asked back to something that they were, in a lab and they came back to the lab again and they, it shows that they can work well with others. Um, what else? Um, those are just the ones that kind of come to top of mind. I'd say you know, for our international applicants, you guys all have a very uphill battle. But we look at all your applications and I think I don't think that there's any one particular thing. I think it's just kind of the overall gestalt of it.
So, several of you brought up holistic review. Kind of in that line, how do you balance metrics like academic metrics like clinical grades and board scores with non-academic qualities such as leadership experiences, previous careers, things like that?
Oh, that's a good one. I would love to say that my system is like highly mathematical and sophisticated. And I don't know if you know that the Thalamus program that we have access to you can tweak it to put these cool formulas in. I never had time to do that last year, so I don't. It really truly is sort of this holistic review, which we have other names for because it's going through a lot of pages of data, and trying to read through it, and so it's. For us, it's kind of a gestalt of those values. We remind ourselves of those value statements and go through and try to read through the experiences, the personal statement, and make that a big part of it. These board score things, it's a nice numeric filtering mechanism for some programs that have the luxury to do that. And so it depends on the program you're talking to. These really high reputational programs that are competitive to get into have to start somewhere. Because if we're at 500 applications on day one, I imagine some of these others are at thousands, and so they have to use some function to get through the interview season. There's this rush to get interview dates out there, so you don't have a lot of time after that first day. I don't know if my other PDs had that same struggle, but it's sort of this race to sort of get through the applications as quickly as possible. So we try to do that. So I guess my short answer is balancing it out. We really kind of try to look at all the applications, but that's what VCU has to do. We can't simply go, well, if you don't have a board score above the first standard deviation, above the average, then you're not getting in. It's not something that we can do.
Several years ago, I listened to a webinar that the AAMC put on about holistic review. And the person who was leading that particular discussion was a program director for the UT Houston Internal Medicine Department. And I found out that the definition of holistic review was different than what I thought. So I had thought that holistic in the word meant whole, that we were supposed to look at your application and judge the entirety of your application and compare it to someone else. And I thought that was kind of an insurmountable task that I can't. So I last 3 or 4 years in a row, I've gotten about 650 applications a year. And it is impossible to look at 650 applications and keep in mind all the minute details of every application and judge whether somebody doing research on 2 different papers was superior to them volunteering for a year at a nursing home or what have you. So there's some value judgments that are just impossible to make. So instead, what I found out from this webinar was that holistic review meant that each program got to define what it thought was important to that program, and that then its criteria for who it interviewed was based on that. They would define what they thought was important and interview people on that criteria. So if you thought, for example, that you wanted to train people who had a strong commitment to treating a refugee population, then you would interview for people who in their applications said that they were interested in that kind of thing. If you had a strong commitment to find people who spoke Spanish because you had a large Spanish speaking population, among the people you served, you would try to identify people who said they could speak Spanish. So you would find whatever criteria you thought was actually important to you, and that's how you would seek out uh, candidates. Um, so, for example, one of the criteria I look at, I'm in Temple, Texas. So I am about 150, 200 miles from Dallas and about 70, 80 miles from downtown Austin. And it's not the easiest place to get people to go to because everybody wants to be in the big metropolitan city. Well, the flip side of that is that we're an extraordinarily inexpensive place to live, and you're actually an hour or two from these metropolitan places. So you get all the best parts of the metropolitan places without the expense. But nevertheless, people want to be in the metropolitan place. So who doesn't? Well, married people who are interested in low cost of housing and low cost of living might be interested. So one of the criteria that I'll employ is I'll look among the applicants and say, who has a significant other or is married that would be interested in that kind of thing. So that's, of course, not my only criteria, but that's an example of holistic review.
So yeah, it's tough trying to articulate in a handful of words what you directly look. I think at the beginning we were talking about kind of how we look at we were balancing kind of scores versus experiences and all kind of the non-numerical things. And I think the thing that I'll add is that I think something really, everything's in a balance. I think a really interesting personal statement, really good experiences, a really good fit can balance out for a not terrific set of scores. Um, I think that having, sky high scores and perfect grades, um, but no personality to back it up, I think there are programs for that too. Um, not my program, but there's somewhere for you. So I think everything's in balance. Everybody wants to have all the top experiences, all the best personal statements, and the best experiences, the best personality, and the top scores. But no one has it all. Everyone's got to have, there's something that is not, stellar for you. And so I think that there's a balance. I think there's somewhere for most folks.
Yeah, I mean it's a hard question to answer just because it's not something very quantifiable, like as has been said, right? Um, Again, the thing that I look for is getting the narrative of who you are as an applicant and kind of where you are. Now, I've seen applications where there's a very high board scores or something along those lines, right? And so, but then we say, well, maybe I don't know, even though the board scores are this high, not getting the sense of kind of the drive or the passion. Then I see other ones who may have struggled M1, M2 year, but then you kind of see them blossom as M3, M4. You see like kind of where they discover kind of neuroscience and kind of, maybe they came to it late. And so those are, again, that's like an example of like kind of a something that I look for, kind of like what exactly is are you as a person in terms of kind of like becoming a neurologist? Because again, this is the first step in your journey to becoming a neurologist. And, so that's where I kind of take, the holistic view. And again, we look at everything, we look at, yes, the scores, we look at kind of the dean's letters and the letters of recommendations and all those things and so forth. But, it's not something I think that's easily quantifiable, and as Dr. Creel mentioned, I mean, we take things in terms of like interpretation. It's like how we're interpreting kind of, those, kind of how we're evaluating, I should say.
Thank you for those responses. Now that we've talked about kind of what you program directors look for in the applicants, can we switch gears a little bit and talk about how can we as applicants really assess the fit with the program on our end, especially in the world of virtual interviews? What's the best way for us as applicants to really assess how well we fit in with your program? And if you could also talk a little bit about your resident cohort, kind of how their relationships are, and how we can really assess like how well we're going to fit into the program. Dr. Korb, we can start with you.
Yeah, no. So these are really good questions, by the way. Really thinkers. Fit for the program is the question, right? Like, how do you sort of fit into the program? Well, because again, I can talk about VCU specifically, but then I feel like it's more like a limited thing for all the applicants in different programs. I'm going to use this opportunity to sort of maybe answer a slightly different question, but one that you might think is important. It's sort of maybe the hidden secret for a lot of program directors. You know, a lot of people are asking like, how do I present myself, or what part of myself should I? It's by the way, it's hard. In interviews, if you're a shy person or certainly a humble person, which we want to, it's like you got to put yourself out there very quickly. And so, what are we looking for, and what's the hidden secret? Um, we all the things. Okay, so this is going to sound crass, and I hope it's not too blunt. I mean, we want someone who's intellectually curious. We want somebody who's compassionate about patient care. We want somebody who's kind to their colleagues. We also want someone who's not going to be in our office the majority of the week complaining about how there's no food at conference. Now, why do I use that example? It's real. Actually, by the way, I was that resident annoying my program director, who still to this day, I'm friends with my program director, makes fun of me for being a chief resident who had the gall to suggest we do food every day for a noon conference. But what I mean by all this funny stuff is that we want adult learners who are somewhat self-directed and can thrive with authentic clinical learning environments and moments and encounters. And so what we don't want is someone who is just going to sort of want it all fed to them and complain when it's not. So what kind of person we're looking for? That's why the multiple email example is one that might be a yellow or red flag. Is that that means you might sort of be in our office saying, why wasn't I informed of this requirement? And they were, and that sort of thing. So having that administrative awareness is important. And in interviews, you want to sort of let people know that you're that kind of self-starter that can learn in an authentic clinical learning environment. I hope that answers at least that question, sort of.
I'm not really sure how to measure fit. Our interview structure, I have two teams of interviewers, each one with 5 people on the team. Me as a PD on one team, the assistant program director on the other team, and the chief resident each on one of the teams. So among those 6 people that interview each candidate, I would like to hope that they could have a good assessment of that person. I do have a rubric that I have them assess the candidate on, and each portion of the rubric has points assigned to it. So I do try to standardize it a bit, but I think it's actually extremely difficult in what each one of us gets a 20-25 minute interview to assess who a person is and how good a fit they are, because honestly, people are on their best behavior when they're in an interview. We're on our best behavior, and you're on your best behavior. Have I had candidates that I thought were serial killers? Yeah, okay, yeah, but I'm sure that wasn't their fault. That was just how they presented themselves on the interview, and they could have been completely different people. So I think it's an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. I think the better way, it is probably easier to judge fit from the candidate side than from the residency side, because the places that you're interviewing at. So if you're interviewing to a place that is a university medical center that has lots of research going on and you're interested in research, that's going to be the place you're going for. If you're interviewing for a place that has more of a community vibe to it, that is a different kind of feel. So I think it has more to do with who you as the candidates are selecting to interview at, because it is hard from our end to judge fit. Everybody's on their best behavior for the brief time that you're with us. And it's only been made harder by virtual interviews.
Yeah, I was just about to make that point. Like in the era of Zoom and Thalamus, it's extraordinarily challenging. And so, just taking it from the angle from your perspective as applicants, I think a lot of places have kind of, like some sort of virtual meet and greet and those kind of things where, prior to the interview day or, maybe kind of timed a little bit shortly after an interview day where you get to meet the residents and so forth. And I'll be honest. I mean, the virtual ones can be hard. It's challenging. It's facetious and those kind of things. Because again, you're kind of sitting in front of a Zoom screen, trying to kind of hey have a social, which we were all doing in like 2020 during the height of the pandemic and everything. And you're trying to gauge, how do I get along with the residency and and the culture here. And so it's challenging. I think us as program directors and kind of residencies kind of know that, and especially kind of a lot of like all of our residents now in the last couple cycles have gone through this, and so they know how awkward it is and how strange it is to kind of have this kind of social interaction. But my point really being is try to kind of get a vibe from the residents themselves. Kind of get a sense of kind of how they interact with each other, what their culture is, and I think that can tell you a lot about kind of the cultural fit. One thing I always say during the interview trial is that, and I truly believe this, I think like 90%, 95% of neurology programs, you're going to get good training. You're going to learn how to be a neurologist. You're going to be an excellent, excellent neurologist and everything. But again, you want to find the one that is, that you're going to thrive at, and that could be at, there's plenty of great institutions, plenty of great programs, and I think that that's the nuance in it. That's kind of the hard part of things. But rest assured, kind of I truly believe that most programs are going to get top-notch training to be a neurologist.
Yeah, I think it's hard from the applicant side to kind of get a sense of, the flavor and the vibe of each program. I agree. Most programs you're gonna get a solid education. You're gonna become a neurologist. You're gonna be competent to practice. Either go to a fellowship or practice independently. I think you just have to pay attention to what, the couple of breadcrumbs that are out there. I think, see how the resident interactions are. If a program has an open house, if a program has a social media page, if a program has, whatever clues are out there, I think you have to look at what you can. And some of it is just going to kind of go on reputation and type of institution and location. Some of it you'll have more particular interactions. But I agree, it's tough. When you're in kind of the older in-person interview days, you could, see how people interact in the hallways. You could see those little interstitial moments, and those are a lot harder to grasp on Zoom. Um, I don't think that I think that being able to interview people from all over the place, being able to, not having to fly all over the country, I think that, you know, I like a lot of those things about the modern interview Zoom landscape, but it's harder for you guys to really kind of get a sense of what's a program like on a day-to-day basis, where would you fit? And so when a program tells you something, either explicitly or implicitly, I think you have to kind of go with your gut on it. If it feels like it's not for you, or if it feels like it is for you, I think listen to that spidey sense.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I think that, there's you go through this process, and I know a ton of applicants and some of our residents that have said like, I thought that X place was the perfect place for me. On paper, it looked amazing. This is where I wanted to go, and then I didn't really vibe with it, But then this other place that I interviewed at is, I got that gut feeling. I got that vibe that I was gonna do well there. I was gonna thrive there, and so forth. And don't ignore that, because I think that is sometimes more telling than kind of the analytical aspect of things, with like numbers and kind of the whole kind of what's on their websites and so forth.
I would be curious to know if NMatch can run a poll and ask candidates if they would like to return to in-person interviews. So with virtual interviews, the number of applications have skyrocketed, and honestly, people are less choosy about where they're applying to because of that. When you had to travel to a location, it cost more, and so you were more choosy about where you went. So you were more concerned about whether you were a good match or not. So I'd be interested from the candidate side. I know we would like to be able to see people in person to see these things that you can't quantify over a video link. But I'm curious to know how many of the candidates would like to go back to in-person interviewing, and is essentially decreasing the number of applications and being more choosy about where they apply to.
That would definitely be interesting to see, and that's definitely something we can put up on our Instagram and share the results with you with. Um, so we are getting to the end of our session now. I want to thank you all for all the wonderful insight you've given us. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask if all of you could share one last parting piece of advice. Um, so if I could start with Dr. Korb.
Oh, of course. Got to start with me. Parting piece of advice. Advocate for yourself, meaning that you'll probably get a lot of advice from people like us, but do what feels right to you in terms of how many programs to apply to, which programs to apply to. Again, you can collect those opinions and advice from other people. Also, one last one. I know I can always think of one. Make sure your application is ready on day one. A lot of us look at it on day one, and you can reset the filter and capture new ones. But I think it's best for, especially for these more competitive programs, you're going to want to have your name in the pot on day one.
Be authentic, be who you really are. So it is way easier to be authentic than whatever made up individual you think that we want to see. Um, if you end up fooling us about somebody who you're not, you're going to be less happy where you end up. So, if you're a character, be a character. If you're quieter, that's okay. Be your authentic self. Tell me something interesting. I do want you to be interesting, and every last one of you is interesting. But be authentically who you are, because we'll figure it out.
I would say, I kind of mentioned it before, but, kind of trust your gut. I mean, there's going to be a lot of information flying, out there. And so really kind of think about, kind of when you interview at a place, like, gosh, how did I feel about that? Did I really like that? Did I not like that? And so forth. And so again, I think that that's kind of the really, really something that I tell all of my medical students too. The other thing I'll mention is, I know it's a stressful time. It's going to be very, very stressful, this whole year, but try to enjoy it too. I mean, this is an enjoyable experience. You do get to meet, a lot of cool people. You get to, make connections without even realizing it. So, try to. I know that's hard, but if you can.
Let's see. So just kind of, I'll come up with kind of a fully my own one in the end. I'll say just building off of the couple things before, have your application complete on day zero, including, ideally if you can, letters of rec and scores and whatnot. Um, I know that can be sometimes chasing down your letter writers can be a challenge, but try your best to do that. And then just briefly, details matter. Double spell check, grammar check, make it look like you're paying attention. Um, but I think kind of the ending piece of advice I'll say is, you know, trust your gut. You'll figure out what feels good for you. Don't, commit to saying, oh, I've got to go to this program because it's a name brand if it really doesn't feel like the right fit for you. You know, if you think you're gonna, like I said, 4 years is a long time. You want to go to the place that feels right, that feels like it's gonna be a good fit for you, that meets your priorities, and don't try to force a square peg into a round hole.
I will add on one thing. Um, it's always nice afterwards to receive a thank you letter after the interview. That shows interest and politeness and that you're raised well. Um, but but don't send an email saying that we're your number one pick, because all of you say that, and we can't all be your number one pick. So it's much appreciated with a thank you letter. I think that shows great politeness and good citizenship.
And with that, thank you so much to our PDs, Dr. Korb, Dr. Creel, Dr. Levy, and Dr. Lee. We really, really appreciate your time so much from the bottom of our hearts. And I know all of our participants today really appreciate your wise wisdom and all of your advice. I'm just going to share my screen one more time. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today. This is our second out of third adult PD panel. We have one more on Friday at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. We also have a child neurology PD panel coming up in 2 weeks. So that information will also be advertised very soon. Feel free to follow us on Instagram and Twitter just for more updates. Like Megan has said in the beginning, we're going to have more residency panel or resident panels, mock interviews, and really going to try to make this process easier for everyone. So thank you again so much for joining us tonight, and we hope you guys have a great day. Thank you again.